FOS TV is brought to you by the Lion's Den. The Den always has been and always will be about enjoying family and friends in an environment steeped in Happy Valley tradition. So come back to the Den, the perfect place to recall old memories while creating new ones.
The Virginia teams that we played in the mid-90s, early 2000 were very similar. Big, tall defensive linemen, offensive linemen, big DBs. I saw Coach Poindexter on their sideline when I was watching tape of them. You know, he was an excellent, strong safety for them that was a very, very good player. Big guy, you know. They've got similar players. You know, I think they've got a great home field environment, atmosphere. It's a loud place. Our guys got to be ready for that. But I definitely see some similar qualities of the teams that we played. And we had great rivalries with them at Georgia Tech and at Maryland. We had great rivalries with them. We'd won one year, they'd win the next year. You know, I can remember 51-48 games, 13-10 games. I mean, all kinds of types of games. So it's a very, very good program, and Mike London's done a great job with the program.
Mark Brennan of Fight on State here with our weekly Bill O'Brien press conference wrap, joined again by Greg Pickel of Fight on State. Greg, Penn State coming off a difficult loss to Ohio in the opener. Bill O'Brien, kind of a different tone today, Tuesday when we're taping, than after the game when he was very short, abrupt with answers, obviously was kind of angry. Clearly he's had some time to take a step back and evaluate things. What kind of jumped out at you from the PC today?
Yeah, much more level-headed demeanor from O'Brien today. It wasn't so much of the yes and no answers that a lot of you guys on the board noticed, but he was more willing to get into some of the things that he had previously said, I just need to coach better about. And that's what really jumped out. He talked about Gerald Hodges. He talked about injuries to Stephon Morris and Bill Belton. He calls both probable and day-to-day. And he talked a little bit about red shirts and Akeel Lynch. He covered a lot of ground in this press conference today, maybe even more than last week. And he was just very personable and very eager to talk today, and it was a very big difference from Saturday.
Yeah, a couple of things that jumped out to me. On our forums, a lot of people were really riled up, and I wrote it. I mean, I thought that the Gerald Hodges thing really didn't make sense in terms of Gerald Hodges, the linebacker, returning kicks on any level. And he was asked about that directly and basically said, you know, as much as he plays, it probably wasn't the best thing to do. And I know a lot of people were demanding, oh, tough follow-ups have to be asked after that. And he basically admitted that that wasn't the way to go. Conversely, he was also asked if the team was tired at the end of the game, because it appeared to be, and he said he didn't think they were tired. He thought a lot of the issues against Ohio were the inability to convert on third down, which obviously was an issue, the inability to force turnovers, which was clearly an issue, and the fact that the team was relatively inexperienced at key spots on offense and guys just not used to making plays. So I think he came in and addressed most questions that people had honestly and straightforward.
Yeah, I think I'll buy somewhat the fact that he didn't think his team was tired. I think towards the end of the third quarter, start of the fourth quarter, you saw all four defensive linemen, no matter who, were in there, hands on the hips. Yeah. The linebackers looked a little fatigued as well, so I'll buy that somewhat. I mean, he's right. He hammered home numerous times. They didn't convert on third down. They didn't stop third down, and they didn't make plays, and I think everyone would agree with that you think of the overthrown passes, you think of the dropped balls, the missed screens. They all add up eventually, and regardless of the fatigue, it doesn't really matter if you don't make the plays to begin with. So I'll buy that somewhat, but again, they did look a little gassed at times.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the defense. And I think maybe I should clarify. Michael Zordich was asked specifically about Jordan Hill's comments earlier today, which again, Tuesday, as we're taping this, Jordan Hill said that he was tired toward the end of the game, and Michael Zordich said, the fullback, in fairness, the defense was out there for 90 or however many plays, so they probably should have been gassed. But that goes back to, I think, the inability to do some of those other things. So yes, while the defense definitely was tired, and I think if they make the plays that need to be made offensively and defensively, that defense isn't on the field maybe as long as it needs to be, or as long as it was. Getting back to the injuries, he sounded pretty positive. I know you mentioned he said they were probable and day-to-day. But I got the sense that he was pretty positive that Belton, the tailback, and Stephon Morris will be ready to go. I think Stephon Morris, it's absolutely vital that he plays, because we saw Daquan Davis, a true freshman coming in a little bit undersized, going up against a quarterback who played real well in the opener. That could be a problem. In terms of Bill Belton, he said if he can't go, they're confident in Derek Day. And then I want to say he mentioned in order Akeel Lynch, Zwinak, and then Curtis Dukes, right, which you have to wonder what's up with Curtis.
Day as well.
Well, no, I'm sorry. After
right.
Day. I'm sorry, after Day, who he said would probably be the guy if Belton can't go. He mentioned him in that order, which makes you wonder what's up with Curtis Dukes. But Akeel Lynch did not play in the opener, the true freshman, and he said no decision has been made there on whether he'll redshirt or whatever. They're going to play that by ear.
Yeah, it's really interesting that he went down the redshirt road with Akeel Lynch. We had heard him make that similar statement previously when asked about redshirt freshmen, in the terms that if you're not going to redshirt them, you have to make sure they play. And Akeel Lynch was someone that was never really brought up in that discussion. He was on the 3 deep out of for the first game last week, and then suddenly today he comes out with that he may redshirt him if they don't think he's going to play him enough. I guess it all comes down to Belton's injury. And he also mentioned that it's not fair to say that if a few freshmen didn't play in Saturday's game that they would be automatically redshirted. He said that give that some time. He said if a freshman hasn't played by about halfway through this season, then it's probably fair to assume he's redshirted. So for you guys wondering about that, give it some time. Give it until at least Big Ten season.
Well, and where that comes into play, obviously, is with the ability to transfer. Anybody who has not played can transfer with the NCAA sanctions at any time. I actually give OBrien and the staff a lot of credit for not letting that play in. I think they're looking at the best interests of the team and the players. They could easily just play everybody and blow everybody's red shirt and force them to stay, but it doesn't look like they're going to do that. Another key thing that came up today, Bill O'Brien was asked, do you think we'll see more of Paul Jones this week? And he basically said, no. I mean, that they are a one-quarterback team right now, and Matt McGloin is going to be the guy. Beyond that, though, when he was talking about some of the plays that weren't made, he did mention some passes that were open that were not completed. And really, as I look at it, McGloin is a guy who's been around. He's got to step his game up.
Yeah, absolutely. And O'Brien was careful to put onus on McGloin not making throws, but he also had mentioned dropped passes and balls that hit guys' hands. So he also put some blame on the wide receivers. But at the same time, if you go back to that game and you look at the plays that were missed, Matt McGloin made a lot of overthrows. Whether you consider Kersey's to be an overthrow or him not getting under it there in the third quarter is your prerogative, but especially the tight ends coming off of contact and then going out. He overthrew Matt Lehman a couple times. He overthrew Kyle Carter a couple times. You're absolutely right, Mark. He needs to step up and start making those passes. This is an offense he should thrive in, simply because all he has to do is find the open man and complete the pass. There's not a whole lot of thinking he has to do, and that should make his job easier, not harder. Saturday he made it harder.
Yeah, with a lot of the new faces, and one of the photos people saw on our site was after the Bill Belton fumble, Donovan Smith picking up his mouthpiece as, now this is a redshirt freshman, and that's the kind of thing that that guy's going to know. He's going to learn from that. But with this team, you have these veterans on both sides of the ball. There's more of them on defense, but these guys absolutely have to step up, and they're the ones who have to, start making the plays. And I think there could be kind of a trickle-down effect, and I think it would actually be positive if they're able to start doing it this week against Virginia. Another thing he said today that I thought was pretty funny, I asked him specifically about the number of walk-ons they have in key positions, and could that possibly help them going forward when they're going to need to recruit a lot of walk-ons? And he said they don't call them walk-ons anymore, they call them run-ons, right. Because everything's about fast. And I just thought that was kind of a cool little thing, and another one of these things that's kind of injecting a little bit of energy into the program.
Yeah, Michael Zorich had said when asking his portion of the press conference today whether that gives a little bit more fun, a little bit more involvement to the guys that are on the scout team, which they now call a dirty show, and to the run-ons. And he did say that he believes it does, because they have something to take pride in. You're not just a scout team. And his quote was, it's not that these guys were just here because nobody wanted them. They were here because they can't get a scholarship and they walked on. And I think that really hit home in the sense that, it's like a JV team in high school almost, not the same comparison, but they get the starters ready for this, this week's opponents, this week's formations. So, yeah, I think it was very interesting that he noted that, and it's something he said, and he admitted that he took from New England with Bill Belichick.
Yeah, and speaking of this week's opponent, these press conferences today were piped down to Charlottesville, so the Virginia beat writers could listen to everything. And I'll bet you the one thing that they were surprised about, there was very little talk about Virginia.
Right.
And I think it's still the fact that everybody's looking back at that first game of the era. And as much as OBrien tried to look forward and say they're not looking back, very little mention. I mean, he talked about how they're, offensively a big physical offensive line and kind of a physical team overall. Talked about how it can be an imposing place to play, which I don't know about that. I think he's going to have a little bit of an eye-opener when he gets around the Big Ten. Hey, you ain't at Georgia Tech or Maryland anymore. When you're going to Charlottesville, that's going to be one of the easier road venues in terms of how loud the fans are and stuff. It's a good venue. It's a beautiful stadium. They're great fans, but that ain't Ohio State, and that ain't Iowa or Wisconsin or Nebraska or a lot of these places in the Big Ten that Bill O'Brien will be to in the next however many years. But there just wasn't a whole lot of scouting or anything. Now, obviously, they're looking at tape and stuff, but not a lot of talk about Virginia.
No, he didn't really touch on it. He talked about their running backs, and they sort of do a running back by committee. That was one of the things that he mentioned, but it really revolved around their line. They're a big physical line. It's the type of team that he said was there when he coached with Georgia Tech in the mid-1990s, late 1990s. So he's a little bit familiar with what they offer. It's certainly a different look now than it was then, I'm sure, just the way the game changes. But you're right, there was very little talk about Virginia, and that's something that we'll be looking at, I'm sure, over the next couple of days here, because now you have a coach that really hasn't given you a whole lot of ideas about what they're going to do to attack this Virginia team. Granted, they don't usually give you a whole lot anyway, but you usually get a little bit out of them, and all he really talked about was the size of the offensive line and the running back by committee, which was all pretty well-known stuff anyway.
Yeah, one of the fun things to watch will be Michael Rocco, the son of a former Penn State quarterback and longtime Penn State administrator and assistant coach Frank Rocco. He's the quarterback down there, and it's going to be mixed emotions for a lot of Penn State fans because the Rocco family was really a big part of everything at Penn State. So you're kind of half pulling for the kid, but also the situation, the spot that Penn State's in. This is, every win is a must-win now. But I will say this, coming off of that difficult loss, he seemed, O'Brien, in wrapping up here, I thought he seemed more upbeat. You could tell the positive message that he's trying to get across to the team, and at least from Zordich, it doesn't seem like they're wallowing in that loss.
No, Jordan Hill didn't sound that way this morning either. Everyone's really looking forward to the next week, and they realize that if they look back, Jordan Hill had a great quote this morning. He said, "We don't want to let Ohio beat us twice." And I think they know very well that if they dwell on last week, Virginia runs a little bit of a weird offense with the running back by committee. They can do a lot of different things, and if they dwell on last week's game and don't prepare for this Virginia team, they're going to get snuck up on here again. And not necessarily that Virginia needs to sneak up on them, but they need to look forward. And I think all three guys we've heard from today, and I'm sure the three we do tomorrow, will have that mindset that we need to look forward and figure out what Virginia is going to do, because Ohio is not really going to help us beat Virginia. I mean, the things Penn State did well, and O'Brien said they did some things well against Ohio, and there was a lot of good things to build on, but there's a lot of things that need fixed too, and I think you have to start there.
Anything else on that notepad that you think needs to be said, or did you kind of handle it all before I wrap up here?
Yeah, not particularly. The one thing that a lot of the folks on the boards wanted to know was the fact of the balance, run the pass, and he did take credit or blame for that rather, and say that that's something he needs to improve upon. He said he doubts you'll see this Penn State team throw 50 times a game unless they have to, like they did this weekend. So that was one thing that a lot of you guys wanted to know, and that he did address, that that's not the balance they're looking for, and that's hopefully something they don't have to repeat going forward.
Yeah, and I'll talk about a different balance, the balance of national media to local media, who was at the press conference this week as opposed to last week, and also after the game. There was really no national media here at all. So I think a lot of that storm may have passed. And I don't, for better or worse or whatever, but it definitely was a much different feel, kind of just to beat people and the people who are usually around for these sort of things. So that's kind of it. We're going to wrap it up here. Our second I think we're doing okay here. Our second Bill O'Brien press conference wrap for Greg Pickel, who I'm always on the verge of calling Bill Pickel, but for Greg Pickel, I'm Mark Brennan from FightOnState.com. We'll be sure to talk to you again next week.